How could a simple Indonesian migrant worker change the lives of an American billionaire family in a country far from her homeland? Asia had only intended to earn a living for her family, but fate led her to the Montgomery family, a wealthy household that never imagined their encounter with a Muslim woman would shake the foundation of their beliefs. Behind the grand walls of the Montgomery estate, an internal struggle began. William, the young heir, found himself questioning the meaning of his life. Unknowingly, Asia became the light that illuminated their path to the truth. Would faith be strong enough to transcend the barriers of culture and belief? Witness the extraordinary journey of an Indonesian migrant worker who became the catalyst for an American billionaire family's conversion to Islam. A journey of self-discovery, unexpected guidance, and the search for true identity. In a small village in Java, the morning felt unusually quiet. Asia stood in front of the modest wooden house that had been her home since childhood. She clutched her old suitcase tightly, reluctant to let go of the memories it carried. In front of her, her parents, Mr. Rahman and Mrs. Sidi, watched her with a mixture of pride and worry. Tears welled up in Asia's mother's eyes, but she tried to hold them back. Despite her efforts, tears streamed down her cheeks as she whispered a heartfelt farewell. Her father placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. With a heavy heart, Asia kissed their hands as a sign of respect before turning away. She walked toward the waiting bus, her footsteps hesitant. As the bus took her to the airport, she gazed out of the window, lost in thought. Upon arriving in New York, Asia felt overwhelmed by the bustling city around her. The towering skyscrapers, the fast-paced lifestyle, and the unfamiliar faces made her feel small in this foreign land. An officer from the employment agency greeted her and escorted her to her new workplace, the residence of the Montgomery family. As the car approached a grand, European-style mansion on the outskirts of the city, Asia was left speechless. A high fence surrounded the magnificent house, and a beautifully landscaped yard stretched out before it. The car pulled to a stop, and a middle-aged man in an expensive suit stepped out of the house, greeting her with a warm smile. "Welcome, Asia. I'm Richard Montgomery," he said in clear English, just enough for Asia to understand. She bowed her head respectfully. "Thank you, sir," she replied in her limited English. Inside, she was introduced to the rest of the family. There was Linda Montgomery, Richard's wife, who carried herself with elegance and grace. Then, there was their son, William Montgomery, a 20-year-old young man who seemed different from his parents. Unlike them, he was quiet and reserved, his gaze filled with curiosity as he observed Asia. With a small smile, William simply said, "Hi, Asia." "Hi," she responded, tired but polite. From that moment, Asia's responsibilities began, cleaning the large kitchen, organizing books in the library, and ensuring that every room remained spotless. Despite the exhaustion, she carried out her tasks with sincerity. That night, after finishing her work and ensuring the Montgomery family was asleep, Asia knew it was time to turn to Allah. She performed ablution, then found a quiet corner in the dimly lit living room. She laid down her small prayer mat, brought all the way from Indonesia, and began her night prayers. Deep in prayer, she sought strength and guidance to navigate the challenges ahead. She had no idea that someone was watching her. William stood in the shadows, silently observing her. He wasn't sure why, but something about the way Asia prayed captivated him. He remained still, watching, unknowingly witnessing something that would soon change his life forever. As the days passed, Asia slowly adapted to life in the Montgomery household. She woke up before dawn to clean, prepare breakfast, and ensure everything was in order. But living in a foreign environment was not easy. Her English was still limited, making communication challenging at times. Asia had difficulty understanding instructions from Linda Montgomery. "Asia, could you bring me the silver tray?" Linda asked one morning. Asia paused for a moment, trying to understand her employer's words. "Silveri?" she muttered softly. Seeing her confusion, Linda smiled patiently. "Yes, the silver tray. In the kitchen." Realizing what she meant, Asia immediately ran to the kitchen and searched for the silver tray. After finding it, she brought it to the dining room with a sense of relief. William, who was sitting at the dining table, observed the interaction. He noticed how Asia tried her best to adjust despite the language barrier. There was something about her patience, her quiet strength, that intrigued him. Over time, William found himself watching her more closely. He noticed how she worked tirelessly, always wearing a gentle smile, even when exhausted. He saw how she never missed her prayers, no matter how long her day had been. One night, William happened to see Asia praying again. This time, curiosity got the best of him. "What are you saying in your prayers?" he finally asked. Asia looked up, surprised, but then smiled. "I am speaking to Allah, seeking guidance and peace." William didn't know why, but there was something in the way she spoke that made him want to know more. That conversation became the first spark of his spiritual journey. That night, William returned to his room with a mind full of questions. He sat by the large window overlooking the garden, trying to understand his emotions. He had lived a life of luxury, yet there was always something missing, an emptiness he couldn't explain. His family had never pressured him into anything, but he had never felt a clear sense of purpose either. Seeing Asia's serenity, he wondered, was it her faith that gave her such peace? Was it something he had been searching for all along? At breakfast the next morning, William was quieter than usual. His father, Richard Montgomery, noticed. "William, are you okay?" he asked. William shrugged. "I've just been thinking about something." Richard didn't press further, but he could sense that his son was going through something. William had even asked him about Islam the other day, which was unusual for him. Later that afternoon, William found Asia sweeping the garden. "Asia, can I ask you something?" he said hesitantly. "Of course, Mr. William. What exactly is Islam?" Asia smiled warmly. "Islam is a way of life. It teaches peace, submission to Allah, and gratitude for everything we have." William nodded, taking in her words. He had always thought of religion as just a set of rules, but the way Asia spoke about Islam made it sound deeper. Over the following days, William changed. He spent more time alone, reading articles and watching videos about Islam. His mother, Linda, noticed a shift in her son. One evening, Richard approached William in his study. "Son, I've noticed you've been thinking a lot lately. Is there something you want to talk about?" William hesitated for a moment before finally admitting, "Dad, I think I'm searching for the truth." Richard placed a reassuring hand on his son's shoulder. "Then search for it, William. I just want you to be happy." At the door, Asia accidentally overheard their conversation. Her heart swelled with emotion. William was truly interested in Islam. But she knew his journey had only just begun. William became increasingly immersed in his search. He read the Qur'an online, watched Islamic lectures, and even started questioning his old way of life. As the heir to the Montgomery fortune, his world had always revolved around luxury, social events, and high-status gatherings. But now, he found himself feeling disconnected from it all. The more he learned about Islam, the more he felt drawn to it. He was nearing a life-changing decision. One evening, he found Asia in the Montgomery house's back garden. She looked as if she had something to say but hesitated. "Asia," William began, "the more I read about Islam, the more I feel like this is the truth." Asia's face lit up. "Alhamdulillah. That's a good sign, Mr. William. Islam is a light for those who seek it sincerely." William was silent for a moment, absorbing her words. Talking to Asia made him feel less alone in this journey. But the challenges were only beginning. As he grew more convinced of Islam, he began facing pressure from his surroundings. His friends started questioning his change in attitude. They noticed he no longer enjoyed the same activities he once did, and whispers about his strange new interests spread among them. Yet, despite the doubts and resistance from those around him, William felt more at peace than ever before. He knew this was just the beginning of a new chapter in his life. William's friends noticed a change in him. One afternoon, as they sat in an upscale cafe, one of them leaned in and asked, "Why have you changed lately?" William smiled slightly. "I'm looking for something more meaningful in my life," His friends laughed. This is strange. We have everything: money, parties, women. What more do you need? William simply shook his head, unwilling to argue. He knew they wouldn't understand what he was feeling. However, the most surprising reaction came from his mother, Margaret Montgomery. One evening, she approached him anxiously. William, I heard from your friends that you've changed. You don't go to parties anymore, and you're often seen with Asia. What's going on? William looked at her with warmth. Mom, I just want to understand life more. I feel like I've been missing something important. Margaret sighed deeply. You know, I just want you to be happy. But I'm afraid you're making a decision that will change everything. His father, Richard Montgomery, who overheard the conversation, remained silent, observing both mother and son. William's spiritual transformation had started subtly. Since learning about prayer from Asia, he had begun practicing in his private room. He also started reading the Qur'an and reflecting on its meanings. But his mother soon discovered his secret. One morning, Margaret entered William's room and froze. On his study table lay a prayer mat and a copy of the Qur'an. Her eyes widened in shock. William, what is this? William turned to her calmly. This is the Qur'an, Mom. I'm studying it. Margaret's heart pounded. Are you serious, William? Are you really considering becoming a Muslim? Her voice trembled. William met her gaze with conviction. Mom, I feel peaceful when I get closer to Islam. I'm just searching for the truth. Margaret shook her head. You don't know what you're doing. You are the heir to the Montgomery name. What will the media say? What will people think? I'm worried this will damage our family's image. Richard finally spoke. Margaret, we can't force belief on someone. William is old enough to choose his own path. Though hesitant, Margaret knew her husband wouldn't change his stance. Beyond his family, William's friends also noticed his transformation. On campus, some began mocking him. Hey William, I heard you like Islam now. One sneered. Don't tell me you actually want to be a Muslim? Another laughed. William clenched his jaw but remained composed. I just hope you respect my choice. That night, feeling lost, William sat alone in a park, gazing at the sky. Asia, passing by, noticed him. Mr. William, you look troubled. What happened? William sighed heavily. It's hard, Asia. My mother is against it. My friends are distancing themselves. It feels like I'm losing everything. Asia smiled gently. That's the test of seeking the truth, Mr. William. Everyone who wants to get closer to Allah is tested. But believe me, with difficulty comes ease. After many trials, William's determination only grew stronger. He realized that Islam wasn't just a religion, it was a way of life that brought him true peace. One evening, he gathered his parents in the living room. Father, Mother, I have something very important to tell you. Richard looked at his son attentively. Margaret's heart pounded. I have decided to become a Muslim, William said firmly. Margaret's eyes filled with tears. She couldn't bring herself to oppose her son's wishes, even though anxiety still gripped her heart. The next day, in a mosque in Los Angeles, William sat cross-legged in front of an imam. Asia was there, witnessing the moment that marked the completion of his journey. With a strong and confident voice, William recited the Shahida. From that day forward, he changed completely. William became more disciplined, more patient. He woke up earlier, treated people with newfound respect, and embraced his faith with his whole heart. For the first time in his life, he felt truly at peace. As William spoke, his voice was steady and full of conviction. I see the peace in Islam, and I see it in Asia as well. I was curious at first, and when I started learning, I found something I had been missing all my life: true peace. Margaret looked at her son carefully, searching his face for any hesitation. But there was none. His eyes held sincerity, a deep sense of calm she had never seen before. So, Islam makes you feel at peace? She asked softly. William nodded. Yes, Mom. And I want you to feel it too. Margaret didn't know what to say. For the first time, curiosity about Islam sparked in her heart. The next day, Margaret found herself paying closer attention to Asia. She observed how Asia carried herself, with patience, kindness, and dignity. There was a quiet strength in the way she spoke, in how she treated others. Margaret had always dismissed religion as unnecessary, but there was something about Asia's unwavering faith that made her wonder. One afternoon, Margaret finally gathered the courage to approach her. "Asia, can I ask you something?" Asia smiled warmly. "Of course, Mrs. Margaret." Margaret hesitated before speaking. "What makes you so firm in your beliefs? You live in a country where Islam isn't common, yet you hold on to it so strongly. Why?" Asia's expression remained serene. "Because Islam is the truth," she answered simply. "It gives me purpose, direction, and peace. No matter what happens in life, I trust that Allah is in control." Margaret fell silent. That night she found herself searching for information about Islam. She read articles, watched videos, and even found an English translation of the Qur'an. Late at night she sat in her room, reading its verses in secret. Richard noticed. "You've been reading about Islam?" he asked with a small smile. Margaret looked up, startled. "I'm just curious," she admitted. Richard sighed. "I have to admit, I'm curious too." For the first time, Margaret didn't feel alone in her confusion. But even as she explored Islam, she wasn't ready to accept how deeply it was beginning to affect her. One afternoon, Margaret went to a luxury shopping mall in Los Angeles. As she browsed, a sudden loud crash echoed through the building. Panic erupted. People screamed and ran as an armed man stormed into the mall, terrorizing visitors. Margaret froze in place, her heart pounding. She wanted to run, but fear paralyzed her. Suddenly, a firm hand grabbed hers. "Come with me, Mrs. Margaret! We need to hide!" She turned to see Asia, her expression calm yet urgent. Without hesitation, Asia led her to a storage room where several others were already hiding. Margaret clutched her chest, trying to control her breathing. "Asia, how are you so calm?" she whispered. Asia's voice was steady. "Because I trust Allah. We do what we can, but in the end, everything is in His hands." Margaret stared at her, realizing that the peace she had seen in Asia and William wasn't just an act. It was real. It was something she didn't have, something she desperately wanted. When the danger had passed, Margaret sat in the car with Richard, still shaken. "I've spent my life afraid of losing, afraid of the unknown. But Asia and William, they have something I don't." Richard gave her a knowing smile. "You want to know more about Islam, don't you?" Margaret nodded, tears welling in her eyes. "Yes. And I feel like I'm finally finding something I've been searching for." Tears spilled down her cheeks as Richard reached over, holding her hand in silent understanding. Margaret sat beside Richard, her hands trembling slightly. "I want to try praying," she said softly. Richard looked at his wife, his eyes glistening with emotion. He reached for her hand, holding it tightly. "If that's what you want, I'll support you." Margaret smiled, feeling a lightness in her heart she had never experienced before. For the first time in her life, she felt at peace, like something had shifted inside her. That night, as she sat in quiet reflection, she felt an undeniable pull in her heart. She hesitated for a moment before making her way to William's room. "William," she called gently. Her son turned, surprised to see her standing at the door. "Mom?" Margaret took a deep breath. "Can you teach me how to pray?" William's eyes widened in disbelief before they filled with joy. "Of course, Mom! I'd be honored." Margaret followed William to the bathroom, where he carefully taught her how to perform ablution. At first, she felt awkward as she mimicked his movements, unsure if she was doing it right. But William guided her patiently, reassuring her with a smile. When it was time to pray, Margaret stood beside her son, following his lead. As she bowed and then pressed her forehead to the ground in sujud, a sudden wave of emotion overcame her. Tears streamed down her face. It was as if a weight had been lifted from her soul. When she finished, she turned to William, her voice trembling. William, I feel like I've found something that's been missing in my life. William smiled, his own eyes misty with emotion. Mom, this is just the beginning of a new journey. Margaret nodded, knowing deep inside that her heart was now truly opening to Islam. Richard had been watching all these changes from a distance. He saw how his wife, once filled with anxiety and restlessness, now seemed calmer, more at peace. She smiled more, and her eyes carried a softness he hadn't seen in years. One night, as he sat alone in his study, deep in thought, a question gnawed at him. Should I also find out about Islam? The next day, he approached Asia. Asia, can I ask you something? Asia looked up and smiled. Of course, Mr. Richard. Richard hesitated before finally voicing his thoughts. What is it about Islam that gives people such peace? Asia's eyes softened. Islam teaches us that true peace comes from knowing that Allah is always with us, in times of joy and in times of hardship. Her words struck something deep inside Richard. He had spent his life chasing wealth and success, believing they would bring him fulfillment. But now, seeing his wife and son find something so profound in Islam, he couldn't ignore the emptiness he still felt. That night, Richard sat in his study, staring at his laptop screen. He typed "What is the purpose of life in Islam?" and pressed enter. As he read, something inside him began to shift. He read about the concept of God in Islam, the purpose of human existence, and the reality of life after death. The more he read, the more shaken he felt. Islam is not just a religion, it's a way of life. For the first time in his life, Richard questioned everything he had ever believed in. The next morning, Richard found himself seeking out Asia again. Asia, he began, his voice quieter than usual. If someone wants to understand Islam, where should they start? Asia looked at him with deep emotion. Mr. Richard, guidance comes from Allah. If your heart is seeking, I will do my best to help you understand. That night, Richard sat alone once again, reflecting on everything he had experienced. He thought of Asia's patience and sincerity, William's newfound happiness, and Margaret's transformation. And for the first time, he wondered, is this what I've been searching for all along? Richard sat in quiet reflection, thinking about Margaret. She had become noticeably calmer and more peaceful. He turned to William, who was explaining the meaning of certain verses from the Qur'an with enthusiasm. There was something different about today, something profound. He took a deep breath and asked himself, what is true happiness? For years, he had believed that success, wealth, and power were the ultimate goals. But as he looked at his family now, he saw a joy that money could never buy. I have been searching for something my entire life, Richard finally admitted. Something that wealth and success could never give me. And now I realize, Islam is the answer I've been looking for. Margaret's eyes filled with tears. Richard, are you really sure? He nodded with conviction. I've read, studied, and felt it in my heart. I want to join you. I want to become a Muslim. William couldn't hold back his emotions. He embraced his father tightly. Dad, this is the best decision of your life. Asia, who had been standing near the kitchen, wiped away her tears. She never imagined that the billionaire family she worked for would one day embrace Islam. That day, at the mosque, Richard took his shahada. As he repeated the words of testimony, his heart felt lighter than ever before. The congregation erupted in takbir, welcoming him as a new brother in Islam. A deep sense of peace washed over him, something he had never felt before. Since that day, life in the Montgomery household changed completely. Richard immersed himself in learning about Islam, reading the Qur'an, and understanding its teachings. Margaret became more devoted to her prayers and chose to dress more modestly. William, inspired by his father's journey, strengthened his faith and planned to study Islam further. Their transformation extended beyond their home. The Montgomery family decided to run their business with Islamic principles, ensuring fairness, ethical transactions, and dedicating a portion of their wealth to charity. They finally understood that true success lay not in accumulating wealth but in using it for good. In the midst of all these changes, one person's happiness was evident: Asia. The humble woman from Java had never imagined that her journey as a migrant worker in America would lead her to witness something so profound. One afternoon, Margaret approached her with a warm smile. Asia, you are not just a worker in this house, she said gently. You are part of our family. Asia lowered her head, tears threatening to spill. Thank you, Mrs. Montgomery. I only did what I felt was right. Richard nodded, looking at her with deep gratitude. Asia, you have taught us more than you realize, not just through words, but through your kindness, patience, and sincerity. Asia wiped her eyes, overwhelmed by their appreciation. Margaret took her hands. We now understand something we never did before, that sincerity and good character speak louder than 1,000 words. And that Allah always has the best plan for us. Asia smiled, her heart full. As the Montgomery family stood together, bound by faith and love, they realized that their journey had only just begun.